We're here today with our friend Johnny Moto, our newest Arizona drag racing legend, but definitely not new to Arizona or being a legend. I've known Johnny for quite a few years. He's the voice of drag racing in Arizona locally and in NHRA. He's done a lot of work with the NHRA and somebody that really makes the whole drag racing event, the event that makes it what it is. And it's the voice of drag racing. And thank you for joining us today. It's good to have you here, Johnny.
I'll tell you what, I'm honored to be here, and this is really a great opportunity to just talk to you, Chris.
Thank you. Generally, what's your background? I mean, when did you arrive in Arizona?
Well, actually, I came here in 1969, and I was the drag strip that I got a lot of my background at was Niagara Dragway in Niagara Falls, New York, where I seen the E.J. Potters and the Little Red Wagon and rocket go-karts and things like that that really spiked my interest. I came out here in 1969 and got into motorcycles, so my background basically in racing came from the motorcycle aspect of it because I got into motocross. And I went to Beeline Dragway. I never worked at Beeline Dragway, but I, in fact, raced motocross out there at one point and went to so many of the races and got very much involved in continuing my love for drag racing at Beeline because of all the great different side shows that they would put on, like Evel Knievel and the other things that would draw people in, the big crowds and all the fun aspects of it.
It was definitely a sideshow of circus event that's brought the fans in. Besides for the drag racing, they came for, like in the modern day at Firebird Raceway was for Robosaurus. I mean,
absolutely. People
packed the place for that. What drove you? So you were involved with the motocross. You actually rode motocross?
Yes, I did. And then
what were you thinking?
It was kind of wild. I was very fortunate because it's one of those sports that I don't know how I got through without breaking a lot of bones and stuff like that. But it was a fun experience. I met a couple of promoters, John O'Hannesson and Roger Jones, who started a Phoenix motocross track over on 48th Street in Washington. And they asked me if I would like to announce it. And it was right by, in fact, the facility where the U.S. Post Office is now. That's where the motocross track was, right by Compton Terrace and everything. So then we raced there for a while and went to Deer Valley Cycle Park, and where we would do Grand Prix and motocross races, mud bogs, circle track races, and all kinds of different events there, working with disc jockeys, and it was just a crazy scene. It was almost like a fenced-in boondocker, so to speak. But then Firebird International Raceway moved to town.
So when you first picked the microphone up, you went from doing it to be a racer to being the voice. I only know you of always having the right thing to say, being able to fill the dead space with interesting stuff or fun things, making it enjoyable. And what was your first time when you had the microphone in your hand? What went through your mind when your very first? Can you remember what that was like?
Actually, I think that what was important is if I was sitting next to you and we were watching a race and I didn't know you and I seen something that spiked my interest, I would comment to you. And I felt that in seeing something, I would always want to express, like, hey, did you see that? Did you see looked like a flicker there, or a little fire in the carburetor or stuff like that? And I found that just expressing what you see is important in just being outward enough and entertaining enough to make people want to listen to you. The thing was that I never, at that point, never went to an announcing school, didn't know what announcing was, so I felt that whenever I went to an event, whether it was Manzanita Raceway, I would always take my family there, and I'd say, I want to sit over here. Well, that's right in front of the speaker. And I said, well, I want to sit in front of the speaker because I want to hear what he has to say, what he sees.
Wendy McDonald.
And Wendy, of course, was a fantastic announcer. And I always wanted to find out what I think is a plus and what might be a minus in as far as what I see. And I think it was pretty beneficial to me. I felt like I went to my own, or built my own announcing school, so to speak, just by trying to pick up something from this person, that person, and this person, and then trying to put it all together to think what I feel might be entertaining or somebody else might like.
To develop your own style eventually.
But you never know, too. Somebody could come up and say, well, that was kind of funky. But, you know, hey, you just got to try it out.
You definitely did well. And, you know, where most of the drag racers got to know you, and I was aware of the other announcing that you've done, but the drag racers really got to know you at Firebird Raceway. How did that all start?
Well, it was probably, I wasn't there for the very first event, but about a month and a half into their program, a lot of people had said to me, you know, why don't you try this drag racing thing? And I was like, well, you know, I've always been a fan. I went out to Niagara Dragway back east, and I went to Beeline, but I don't know really a lot about that sport. You know, I've now done motocross, Grand Prix, and mud racing, monster trucks, but I'm not really familiar with that. But Craig Hutchinson, I went out and visited him, and he says, why don't you try it? And it was interesting because they gave me a microphone. I went out there, and it wasn't like, you're going to work with this guy tonight, and he's going to show you what's going on. And they said, here you go. And I was, well, all right. And they had like little cron deck clocks down below me on the lower floor. I was on the upper floor, and I'm like looking down and trying to duck and see everything that's going on and kind of like learn the sport. You know, even though you can go watch a sport and feel that it really entertains you, but then to learn about the sport is a whole different aspect of it.
In the booth experience.
Oh boy, but it was so much fun. And you know, I had a great group of people out there, because a lot of the people that when I was hired at Firebird Raceway were the Beeline employees. Almost, it seemed like the whole Beeline drag strip personnel department moved out there, and they were part of that situation. In fact, Charlie Allen, who was the promoter, of course, of Firebird International Raceway, hired me about a month and a half into their program, and I was, I believe, the last employee from that, the longest employee at Firebird Raceway, and I learned so much from that facility and Charlie Allen in particular.
Charlie was a great promoter. Started, he was, before he was here, of course, he was a funny car racer, drag racer for a long time. Then he ran Orange County International Raceway till that facility went away. And we're fortunate that him and a group of investors created our Firebird International Raceway, which is now Wild Horse Pass Motorsports Park. What was your fondest, your first memory of when you got in, you started doing announcing your first national event, your first big event? Because back then we used to have a lot of special races. We had match races. John Force would come in, and no matter what John Force race had, he goes, "I'm happy to be here. I consider Firebird my home track." If he was in Utah, I consider Salt Lake my home city. You know, very good at promoting himself. But what was your first, when you got to announce these guys for the first time, the big guys? What was that like? Did you?
Well, you know, I think in the very beginning at Firebird Raceway, I had an opportunity to work with John Lundberg, and I was his assistant, so to speak.
The golden throat of drag racing.
And now I remember a time where Kenny Bernstein came up, and of course they would all come into town, but they wouldn't really talk to me or didn't know me, but yet John Lundberg they knew from all over the U.S. So Kenny Bernstein came out, and he had his Buick Riata funny car, and So he said to me, he goes, did you ever get Kenny up here and talk to him or interview him? I says, no, I've invited him up a lot of times, but he's never taken me up on the offer. And he goes, okay. So Kenny Bernstein comes around the corner, and he's in his funny car, and John Lundberg says, you know, without a doubt, I think that's one of the ugliest funny cars I've ever seen in my life. And I was sitting there, and So Kenny Bernstein did his burnout, and he made his run. And it seemed like about a minute after he crossed the finish line, I heard the back door pop open. And I turned around, and Kenny Bernstein's like, was that you? And I was like, me? And he goes, and he's seen Lundberg, and he says, let me tell you something about Buick and my funny car. No matter what you think of the car, I'm very fortunate to have Buick behind me, and I would appreciate it if you don't say that's one of the world's ugliest looking funny cars. And Kenny just did a couple other little chimes in on that conversation and then walked out. And I looked at John, and he goes, see, it only takes one little thing and you could get somebody up here if you really want to talk to them.
You know how to pull their chain.
Oh, gosh. But it was interesting. And, you know, I had so many great moments. Talking to some of the biggest names in drag racing has been, I've been so lucky to have an opportunity to do. It's just so interesting that I'm very fortunate. That's all I can say. And I worked with some of the greatest announcers I feel in the sport. I was on headset with the NHRA with Dave McClelland, where I would hear every word they say. And with all their color commentators, Bob Fry, one of my heroes in drag racing announcing, and you know, just everybody. Alan Reinhart and I were the announcers together at Firebird International Raceway.
We were blessed to have you two working together because you guys really worked off each other very well. And I think to me that was some of the peak times of the track itself is when they had the both of you announcing. The fact that you worked with Big Mac McClellan and Fry, both awesome. Between you're talking 3 of the 5 only national event announcers have been. You've worked with them. Definitely Alan moved on. And so he's the current NHRA national event announcer. But that's quite the resume of people to be with and to have worked with and seen their different styles. I've got the pleasure of knowing Dave McClellan very well, and he just said, do you fit? I'm going to ask you if you fit the same situation. He had the face for radio.
He did.
That's just one of his favorite things he says. But you definitely, so you helped develop the track. You saw it grow. Were you working the night of the famous bug attack?
Yes, I was.
What was that like? What was the chaos like there?
It was.
Explain what happened.
Well, what was interesting is that, and this is a crazy side story to that. After every one of that particular event at that time, I would have all my kids out there. My family worked at the races. My wife Jana worked at the races. So we would then have our car all packed up, and at the end of that race, we would drive right to San Diego for a week vacation. So we had the whole family there, and I'm watching, and a couple of funny cars came up to do the burnout, and I kept seeing, like with the lights on the tower, and I'm looking, and you could see all the bugs. And normally with lights on, you'd see bugs anyways, but it was starting to get really, really thick. And then all of a sudden it seemed like a cloud came in, and I was, kind of with a radio next to me, half hearing the conversations going on between the crew, and the funny cars were doing a burnout, and they were backing up, and it came over that they can't get no traction after the burnout. And I was like, can't get traction after the burnout, because you think going through the burnout box, heating up the tires, that it would start hooking up. But it was the bugs were so thick on the ground that they could not get absolutely any traction. And then I'm looking, and I could see in the grandstands, And one of the major concerns with everybody is, I don't know if it was like a 50-cent beer night, but there's guys out there and they're cupping their cups. They're just trying to, man, I don't want none of these bugs getting in my beer. But
you couldn't open your mouth, a bug would fly in.
Oh my gosh, it was terrible, because even once I went out to go get in my vehicle, because we had to call the race. I mean, it was just, people were scared because the bugs would get down into your clothes and crawl around, and it was just such an eerie feeling. And
how many other events have you known that have been called by bug invasion?
That was the only bug out that I've ever heard of.
It was definitely, it was crazy. But these are the situations that you don't expect. The different, how do you fill time when, how do you your job is to, how do you turn the negative into a positive? I mean, you have to be the voice of the track, like Kevin Bacon in the movie where he's saying, he says, "Don't remain calm, do not panic." You had to be that guy.
What was interesting is,
where do you find the ability to do that?
Well, you bring up the bug out, and my national event debut, Bernie Partridge was there, and I finally had
so now there's 4 the NH3 national event announcers you've worked with.
And Mike Lewis. And there wasn't anybody I didn't really work with, but
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Linda Vaughn, and then I had the color commentators, Sid Waterman and Tom the Mongoose McEwen, and just having an opportunity to be with all those color along with the main announcers. But it was my national event debut. So they said, okay, we're at Wild Horse, well, I should say Firebird International Raceway at the time. Now it's, of course, Wild Horse. And it was super gas. And they said, okay, you're going to do super gas. And I came out, and the first pair of cars came to the line, and I believe it was a Mike Beckberger. And there's a guy, one of our local racers, and I became very familiar with a lot of the local racers. I love them all. And they took off the line and crashed into each other. Just got ugly. And it was like, that's it, give me the microphone. They called the race, the lane out. What they had done is put new concrete in at Firebird International Raceway, and the concrete was starting to, it was not the right consistency, so it was breaking apart. So it was like one pair of cars, and that was it. And they said, okay, give me the mic back, and we're going to pull the plug on the race. But I'll never forget that. It's like, okay, here it is, my big shot, and so it's over. But
obviously it built from there.
Oh, actually, it was interesting. I think events like that you can take and use them as positives. So there's no doubt.
You worked for the NHRA in multiple roles over the years. I know that you did a lot of sportsman announcing at different, for the different events, and I would hear, you have the voice that we know it's you. I mean, you're a very unique voice, and you developed a relationship with the racers that way, and you talk about also working the microphone in the booth with the Mongoose. I mean, one of probably the nicest, most genuine people I've ever met in drag racing. And what was that like when you got to work with him? I mean, was you somewhat in awe the first time that, or did you just, you're very professional, so I don't think it would have come across on the microphone, but what were you feeling?
What's interesting is that these people were so genuine, and that's one of the greatest things about drag racing is when you go to a race, everybody's accessible in the pits, and there's not many people where you could say, well, that guy's a jerk. They're all really genuine people. Of course, what you have to be careful about is in some aspects of racing, like one person came up to me one time and said, that Warren Johnson, he's a jerk. And I said, why is he a jerk? And they said, well, he made his qualifying pass, and I went over there, I wanted to get an autograph, and he's over there working on the car, and I says, hey, buddy, can I? I'd like to get an autograph, and he says, he shook his hand like, not now. And he goes, I don't understand. And I said, well, you don't understand because that's his business, and he is the guy who works on the car. And he can't break away, because if he breaks away to sign an autograph from you, that could cost him his next qualifying run. And then it's such a tough business. He's the guy who does all the work on the car. Nowadays, you've got a driver that can actually go out and hang at the rope and sign autographs, and the most he'll do is maybe do his own parachute or do the fuel, but they have other people that can work on the car. And in the older days, it was a lot of those crew drivers that would also work on the car. And but they were such genuine people, and Warren in particular, I became very good friends with, because once the day was done, he was just such a great guy to sit down with and say, hey, Warren, how was your day? And he would just sit with you, and you didn't have to be his friend, but he could just be anybody, and he would talk to you and just be a real genuine person.
I agree. I had a chance to talk with him several times, and I found that to be true. You saw the backside of what the racers would go through, and over the years you saw a lot of teams come and go. Is there any favorite racers you've had from the years that that you miss, or other or that once when even you as an announcer, you had to be excited when certain people would come up to make a pass?
Oh yes, and I look back on highlights of what I've done, and I did a 32 funny car show, and Charlie came up to me and he says, I got somebody I want to do color with you. And I was like, okay, because he never said anything to me coming into the event. And I says, well, who's it going to be? He goes, Trip Shoemake. And I said, okay. And Trip Shoemake came in, and it was like me being a kid in a candy shop, because there would be every pair of funny cars that would come up, and something would happen. Like, he would refer to, well, I remember the time that and this happened to me, and then all of a sudden the steering wheel came off, and I'm almost sitting there like, oh my God, I just wish that, I sometimes hope that when I'm talking, and I'm talking with somebody, that the people out in the stands can hear every bit of that conversation, because it's just so interesting to hear the whole conversation. Yet I know that people are outside, the car is doing a burnout here, and it gets down there, and then they can't hear the full conversation. But the memories that he gave me that night, and also just watching him race, were just unbelievable. Just a memorable moment, to say the least.
We've yet to ever meet anybody who didn't like Trip.
No, one time I had an opportunity to do so many different things. I worked with Diamond P Sports for a while, and I remember one time I was spotting on camera 6, and they were running funny car. Trip Shoemake ran. It was the funny car, the Chief Auto Parts machine, Billy Myers, and he was coming down, and this machine burst into flames, and I'm seeing him come at me, because I'm spotter for the cameraman, and I'm like, you could tell that he can't see anything out there. So then he starts taking the car and hitting the wall just to try to, slow it down. And I'd said to him, in fact, it was after that I did color with him, and I was like, well, Trip, remember I watched you do this, and I said, how did you know to move over and do this? He goes, I didn't see nothing. He goes, I'm just looking for something to hit and slow me down. But again, the stories that he had were just tremendous, and to meet people like that is just I'm very fortunate to have had those opportunities.
A once in a lifetime guy.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. A real true person. You've
been through a lot of things after you've you worked at Firebird for a lot of years, and then kind of went on and did some NHRA stuff, and then for a while we were worried about you and your health. You went through some specific things that I'm not, don't want to blow your HIPAA deal here, but you've been through a whole lot, and your desire to move on and share your happiness and be the person you are is just totally amazing. How do you keep such a positive attitude? I'm sure we all have times when we can't quite do it, but very few people I've met I always see you in a positive attitude. What keeps you going?
I think friends and people that I've met, and with me in particular, starting announcing in like 1979, I met so many people in racing, and it's like a family. And especially when I had medical problems, that family reached out to me and was concerned. And I think it's different than a lot of businesses. Like we would always talk, like the NHRA family, we would go from city to city when I was on the national tour, and yet it was almost like you're in your home, whether you're in Denver or you're in Sonoma or you're in Pomona. You got that same group of people, your own family that travels with you. And I think that family kept me the desire and the heartfelt prayers that they put out for me. And I think that it really gives me that desire. And I'm still fortunate in being involved in drag racing, being at Wild Horse Pass Raceway, where right now drag racing is struggling. There's no doubt about it, with the amount of facilities that are closing. Like they're going to lose Houston Raceway Park and some of the big national event venues, and with all the rumors going on about Wild Horse Pass Raceway, they're going to build condos or this or that. But now being involved still with that facility, which originally was Firebird Raceway, we've got some programs going that, and I see things that are a positive to the sport. The other night I was there, and a guy came out with an Audi, and I'm looking at it, and it's like a little 5-cylinder Audi, and I'm watching this, and my daughter was with me, and she goes, "Man, that's a cool looking car," and I said, "Yeah, it's a nice looking Audi. It runs 1105, and I'm like, 5-cylinder. I said, "This is pretty interesting." And there was a lot of kids out there, and it was a Midnight Madness show, which then again I'm looking at it like, midnight, racing, you start at 9 and race till 2 in the morning, but you see a lot of young people coming out there with these cars that are pretty interesting machines, and hopefully that's going to give more, bring back people to that sport from not only the spectator aspect of it, but the participating aspect of it.
We definitely need an incubator process to bring people back into drag racing. I think the desire is there. I just think the opportunity in the facilities are what we really lack. And I do see, whatever the outcome of Wild Horse Pass is going to be. But the thing is, it's still out there. We need to support the track, support your local drag strip, because someday you may have none.
Absolutely. And again, and I work with that team, and the general manager of the whole facility had told me that they have no intention of discontinuing the racetrack. And it's so important to have these venues, because if, for instance, that racetrack went away, it would be, to me, very detrimental to my health.
I believe that, and I'm a little political here, but I think there's so many people that are negative about ownership of who really owns the land, this or that, and in reality they're very hospitality minded people, and they like the idea of having a national event on their reservation. They like the idea of the attention that comes to it, and the revenue, and the guests that come onto it, and definitely they benefit from that location and being prime. The city grew out that way, and it can be a lot of things, but I really truly believe that as long as we support the track and people support the track and are appreciative of the track, that if ever comes a time for it to go away, it will open up in another location because they have a lot of space out there, a lot of square miles of land, and in the story needs to be told about that. Don't. People always. It's funny over the years how people complain about this owner or that track promoter, whether it was a guy at Beeline Dragway or the Firebird Raceway or whatever, and everybody complains about that guy. The guy goes away, and then all of a sudden the program gets worse and there's less. Instead of trying to be against something, we need to work for and with the people that do something. So, whether you're in Arizona or anywhere, support your local drag strip.
Absolutely, there's no doubt.
It's amazing. So, you've also been a key person, and we want to thank you for being involved with Arizona Drag Racers Reunion the last few years. So we kind of got you in to come and being our announcer out there, and you've definitely brought a level of excitement out there. Have you enjoyed doing those, and what does that mean to you to be a part of that?
It's an honor to be involved with the reunion because, I have. Again, I was a spectator at Beeline Dragway, and yet the background, the nucleus of the Arizona racers, I've heard about, and then seen them run, and then to get to meet them and to go out to the reunions and honor them with when they're put in the given the honor of being just to get to meet the people that built the racing world in Arizona and be part of that whole situation. And of course, Bill Gusick, who does a tremendous amount of work putting the whole program together. It's just it's an honor actually to be involved in that, to be involved with Arizona drag racing coming from New York.
He does a great. Bill also produces this series as well, and it's his passion, and he doesn't make a dime off of it. He doesn't. There's no revenue. I mean, it doesn't. He does it for the passion and love of drag racing and the fellow racers. But definitely, the great thing about the Racers Reunion is that you see people that you've heard stories about, and they're still there. They're still walking around. A few weeks ago we interviewed Albert Eschenbaugh, and what a tremendous deal. Before we were off for the COVID break we took. Last year we got to Redgreth. And what a great person. And these are people. Red's no longer with us, but when you get to a lot of these events, you get to see people like that, and it's larger than life. And then you get to see it all the way up to the modern day racers. Everybody kind of blends together. It's really awesome that you're involved with that. I have one last question for you. Have you ever driven down the drag strip in a race car?
I've driven down the drag strip in a car.
Okay.
And
tell me about it.
Well, it was embarrassing in the very beginning because reaction times are everything. And I see thousands of runs, and you always think, man, I want to throw up a bag of donuts, man. I want a triple zip. And all of a sudden you get down there and it's like, a 560 reaction time, and it's like, are you kidding me? What's up with this?
It's a lot harder than it looked, huh?
Oh, absolutely. But and then all of a sudden you get the, and I am right now working with a company called Go Fast Entertainment, where we do like shutdown showdowns, like street outlaw type stuff, and no prep, and all different aspects of it. And you can really appreciate what a lot of these drivers go through. And watching somebody come up, and some of my local racers, and they'll say, well, look at this guy in this old 73 Valiant. And I'll look at him and I'll say, you don't want to go up against this guy, because this is like a Brandon Gant, and the guy, you watch his lights and he's like 015 would be slow for him. He could have a triple zip. I mean, these guys are like sharks. It might not look like a shark, but it's a shark in disguise, and you really can respect what these people do in racing. But I worked on my reaction times. I got them down pretty good, though.
So
I know now.
What's a good Johnny Moto light now?
Well, if I could get to be about a 30, I'm okay with a street car, But,
now it's
go
time.
on yellow, right? Go on yellow.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, that's right.
But
Before we went camping.
yeah,
Now we go camping.
absolutely.
Listen, it's been a great pleasure to have you here. You've meant a lot to a lot of people, including me. We appreciate your passion for the sport. I heard once of talk about Vin Scully, and it was said by a famous person who happened to be blind. He says, and at one time he could see, it was Ray Charles before he went blind, and he said, listen to Vin Scully, because when Ray Charles was a kid, he remembered what baseball fields looked like. He said, Vin Scully was so good, he described it so well that it's like I could see. And I would think that people who would if they could only just listen to you and didn't have the ability to see the track, they get that you're that good. And I really appreciate everything you've done for drag racing and being the guy. And we really appreciate having you here today. Thank you very much.
You know, Chris, I want to point out to you that I have a lot of fond memories, because when I was in the tower, a lot of times I wouldn't have opportunities to go out and know what's going on outside the tower. And a lot of times you were my go-to guy by coming up and saying, hey, this is what happened, and this is and giving me those tips that make my job, make me look good. You know, it's people like you that helped me out, and I really appreciate those opportunities that you gave me.
It's been a long, strange trip, and we've had a great time doing it. And we don't have any plans for it to end anytime soon. So take care of yourself. Stay in good health, please.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Johnny.